a gruesome discovery.
Duncan MacPherson.
On top of a 3,000-meter glacier high in the Austrian Alps.
MacPherson, ja. Und wo wäre das genau gewesen? Snowboarden, oder?
A 14-year-old mystery is about to unravel. Right in the middle of the ski run, a body appears through the melting glacier ice. The Iceman is transported by police helicopter to a parking lot at the base of the mountain. There's ID in the pocket. The body in the bag is Duncan MacPherson, a Canadian professional hockey player. He has been missing for 14 years. Hello, I'm Hannah Gartner. This has got to be among a parent's worst nightmares. Duncan MacPherson was 23 years old when he set out on a European vacation and vanished, disappeared without a trace. For 14 years, his parents did not know whether he was alive or dead. Their determination to find him and the truth would take them on a long and courageous journey. A journey full of breathtaking discoveries and shocking revelations. A journey that is not over yet. This is the first time Bob and Linda McPherson have been able to bring themselves to even go near a hockey arena since their son Duncan disappeared. When did you know that hockey was going to be his life?
From the time he was 12. I think that's about all he lived. You know, he lived his life around hockey.
And he was good at it. The tough physical defenseman made it all the way to Junior A by the time he was 17. And like so many of his Saskatoon teammates, his dream was to make his passion his profession.
When you grow up in the prairies, you know, there's not much else to do, so play hockey.
Former NHLer George Pursuit, a family friend and mentor to Duncan, knew the kid had what it takes.
I loved working out, but you know, when he gave me a call at 6 o'clock in the morning to do aquatics at the University of Saskatchewan pool, I kind of said, I'll wait till about 9 or 10, you know.
The kind of all-out effort his dad admired.
Yeah, his work ethic, whatever he did and thought it through very carefully.
Determination, hard work, and a bit of luck won him that dream job in 1984.
The New York Islanders drank Duncan MacPherson from Saskatoon.
Duncan MacPherson turned pro and overnight became a hometown hero.
Obviously, Duncan was a very good hockey player, and to play Junior A #1, to be a #1 draft pick is quite a distinction.
The glory came fast, but it was fleeting. Duncan was a hitter, and he got hit back a lot. Too many injuries kept him out of too many games. In the end, the Islanders moved on to other hitters, but Duncan was already looking ahead. He had worked so hard, and he was only 23.
The game itself he liked, but he didn't like the games that went on. And he told me, you know, when they talk about the team, they don't mean the players. Like, the team is really up there in the front office. So anyway, he was real happy to be moving on in life.
He was going on to a new job in a new country as coach of Scotland's Dundee Tigers. The start date, August 12th, 1989. But first, he was going to kick back, take a little road trip, drop in on some of his old hockey buddies who had also moved their playing careers to Europe. George Pursuit was living in Nuremberg, Germany then, and he was glad to put Duncan up for a few days.
I just told Duncan, well, I just take my car.
Duncan didn't have firm plans, but he did mention a trip to Austria. It was the last time any of his friends would see him alive. Duncan hit Europe the summer of '89, and as always, he'd promised his parents he'd check in with them from time to time.
He always said Linda worried too much about it, and he told her that, you know, not to worry. that if anything ever should happen to me, they will let you know.
Yeah, that's kind of tough because I can hear him say that.
Duncan was just one of those people you could set your clock by. So when he didn't return his friend's car as promised, George Pursuit knew something was up.
You know, I know he's a pretty responsible kid. You know, I know he'd get a hold of me. A couple of days went by, and then I started to be a little concerned because it's just not like him. After a couple more days, I think about after the 5th day, that's when I knew that there's something wrong.
7,500 kilometers away in Saskatoon, Duncan's mother was worried. She hadn't heard from Duncan either.
I could not focus on my job. I was completely focused on it for no reason.
At what point did your maternal instinct kick in and you just knew something was wrong?
On August 11th. That was 1 week, and I just thought, there's something wrong here, because even if there's different time zones and they don't accept or you can't make collect calls, he would find a way to phone.
When the phone finally did ring, it was Duncan's new employer on the line.
I was like, well, I think he's, pretty sure he's in Scotland, in Dundee. No, he isn't, Miss McPherson. That's why I'm phoning you. He never got there. Actually, I remember that my heart hit the floor.
What did you do?
Well, again, we didn't panic. We thought, okay, we'll call George Pursuit.
I knew a fellow in the criminal police in Nuremberg that was a big hockey fan. I approached him, I knew him, and then he said, Duncan's young, he's got a car, he's got money, we don't believe anything's happened to him.
But Linda McPherson knew. She knew something had happened to her son, so she called the RCMP. They told her they don't deal with missing persons on the weekend.
That was quite a shock to us.
Well, what'd they say? Call back Monday at 9 a.m.?
Yeah, during regular office hours. I think that's probably when we got our first clue that if anyone was going to find Duncan, it would not be police in this country or any country, and shortly thereafter we just decided we have to go over there and find him.
By now, Duncan's disappearance was all over the news in Saskatoon. A television camera was rolling as the McPhersons packed up their mountain gear. If Austria seemed like Duncan's likely destination, that's where they'd go too. But they really had no idea what was facing them.
It's real important to us to find out what happened to Duncan, and we'll pursue it with everything we have for as long as we have till we just feel totally satisfied that we can't do anything more.
Did you think you were going to find Duncan?
Yes.
You did?
Very much so, yes. No doubt in our mind we were going to find him. Didn't even enter our mind that we wouldn't. No.
Austria was a whole other world for the McPhersons, who'd rarely ventured past the Saskatchewan border. They knew nothing about the place. They couldn't speak the language, and they had no clue where to start looking. But Austria's small, about the size of New Brunswick. They could cover a lot of ground, so they rented a car, they plastered it with photos of Duncan, and started to search.
I can't even begin to tell you how many hours we had to spend telling each individual police force about our case, and we faced a language barrier.
You had no leads, zip, nothing. Driving into the heart of the Austrian Alps, they stopped in the regional capital of Innsbruck. It has got some of the best skiing in the country. Duncan was an avid skier. Surely he would have checked this place out. Not seen here, said local police, handing the McPhersons the same line they'd heard everywhere else.
And they kept saying, nothing bad happens in Austria. There's a very low crime rate in Austria. Nothing bad happens here.
So nobody took this seriously? They thought this was just some kind of young guy?
He might have found a nice girl and he's off having a good time. That's exactly his words. He was the head of missing persons.
Well, stuff like that happens, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, well, he's not cashing his traveler's checks. well, maybe the beautiful girl that he found is also a very rich girl. And he just laughed it off.
Innsbruck police assured the MacPhersons they had checked every hotel and hostel. Duncan had never stayed in the area. Incredibly, when the parents checked for themselves, they soon found Duncan's signature on this register at an Innsbruck hostel.
If we hadn't done them ourselves, nobody would have done it.
The deputy chief of criminal investigations, Christoph Hundertpfund, would not turn out to be their biggest ally. How is it that a couple from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, can find out what an Innsbruck cop cannot?
I have to admit this, if somebody's missing, there are a lot of missing cases, you don't have the time. You don't have the time to go into details with every case. But the parents, they had a lot of time to do this.
By now, it had been 6 weeks since Duncan left that hostel. Where could he have gone? The man who lent Duncan his car, George Pursuit, enlisted the help of his many hockey contacts in Europe to try to find him. Well, you called everyone you knew to help out here.
Yeah, we were trying to get as much media coverage as we could.
Then a break. The local television station agreed to broadcast Duncan's photograph and a picture of the car.
And it was only within hours after it was on television, the police received a call that that car is sitting up at the lift station at the glacier in the valley there, 40 kilometers from Innsbruck. And that was reported to the police by the parking lot attendant.
How long had that car been sitting in the parking lot?
42 days it sat there.
Finally, the MacPhersons were on the right track. But where was it leading? When we come back, lost leads and lies.
Somebody knew. You just could not just vanish from the face of the earth. Somebody knew.
This is a journey no parent ever wants to make. When 23-year-old Saskatoon hockey pro Duncan MacPherson vanished somewhere in the Austrian Alps, his parents set out to search for him themselves. With little help from authorities and no leads, they found their son's car abandoned for more than a month at a glacier resort. It was an incredible discovery.
We always felt like we can just find the car to start with. Then he'll be close by. That's it, we just felt that.
Close takes on a very different meaning in the Stubai Glacier. This year-round skiing and snowboarding resort covers a lot of kilometers, many of them straight up. Duncan's car was parked in this lot at the glacier. It can hold up to 2,500 vehicles, but it empties out at 6 every night. So one lone red car should have stood out like a distress call. And police investigator Christoph Hundertpfund agrees. Somebody should have called it in. His car sits in a parking lot for 42 days, and nobody says, maybe this is the missing guy's car?
Yeah, normally you would say, I agree with you, if a car is sitting there quite a long time, well, somebody should at least came across it and say, well, there's a car quite a long time sitting there.
And nobody did?
Nobody did.
Finding the car was a victory. But at the same time, the MacPhersons knew very well what it meant. In it, they found the remnants of their son's life, his passport, a backpack, and a bag of rotting groceries.
Well, there is no way to describe it, you know. One minute he's alive and happy and healthy and fit and looking forward to life, and then it's over, or you have every reason to believe it's over.
Searching this mountain range is a daunting task, even for alpine police. This glacier covers an area of 15 square kilometers. Duncan, they thought, must be here, but where? The MacPhersons were about to catch a huge break, not on the mountain peaks, but in that parking lot. somebody finally recognized Duncan from one of those photos taped to their rental car.
He told us all about Duncan's activities on that day, August the 9th of '89.
Snowboard instructor Walter Hinterhützel had given Duncan a lesson the day he disappeared.
He was a professional sportsman, and usually you think these guys are 2 or 3 steps with the nose higher than all the other people, but he wasn't like that.
Hinterhützel still remembers, before they went out on the slopes, he helped Duncan pick out the right equipment to rent. And after just one lesson, he could see Duncan was a natural.
Seeing him working on the snow showed he was a really Canadian hot dog. He was not scared from falling. He had no fear because of the speed.
Later that afternoon, Duncan and his rental snowboard hit the slopes for some practice runs. This was in plain view of the observation deck's restaurant, and witnesses remember seeing him there till at least 2:30.
And the police and the ski operator were quite firm that, absolutely nothing can happen on this ski slope. If anything happened to him, it's because he went outside the ski area.
The Stubai Glacier Resort is one of the biggest employers in the area, and people around here rely on the $34 million tourists bring in every year. So if problems arise on the glacier, no one is in a big hurry to talk about it. These mountain guides helped in the search for Duncan. While they assure us the ski run is safe, they insist on roping us together before they show me the mountain's secret. The cracks, the fissures created by the glacier can over time expand and become huge crevasses. Our alpine guides say this is a small one. It's about 3 meters across and about 25 meters down. That's the equivalent of a 6-story building. So you can imagine if someone comes hurtling down the mountain at full speed and comes upon this, it's like plunging down an elevator shaft.
In front of me, all of a sudden, a massive crevasse appeared.
Snowboarder Oliver Torke from Cologne, Germany, remembers every detail of his nightmare on Stubai Glacier.
All at once, the ground disappeared beneath my feet. It was like standing on a manhole cover that gives way. Everything got dark. The ice walls flew past me. It got quiet.
And when you looked down, what did you see?
Dark. I looked once down to the right and it was dark.
So dark, no one could see down, even though he could see the ski lift above. Then Torke remembered he had a cell phone, and it worked. Did you think at that moment, that's it? I could die here on this glacier?
Yes, I feared for my life. I feared for my life. Look at my arms. When I talk, I get goosebumps.
I see. The fall was frightening, but what happened next was equally disturbing.
And I stood there with the alpine rescue workers at the top of the crevasse. One of them was there with his snow grooming machine. He was filling in the crevasse. The other 2 were standing next to me. They said, "You were lucky." And then they said, "We're not reporting this to the press. Do you understand?"
This is the run Duncan was practicing on the day he disappeared. While crevasses crisscross the entire glacier, the ones directly on the ski run get filled in. Every day at closing time, these 2.5-ton machines called piston bullies come out and do the job. Duncan MacPherson was last seen here at 2:30 in the afternoon. The hill closed at 4 when the bullies came into service. But police didn't start asking questions until 42 days later, when Duncan's car was finally found. They started with a snowboard rental shop. Did Duncan bring his snowboard back?
The owner of that shop, he said, "Well, I don't miss anything. I don't miss shoes. I don't miss a snowboard."
The police inquiry stopped where it started, in that rental shop. If the board came back, so did Duncan, period. That's when police called off the search. But this made no sense to Linda MacPherson.
He didn't go anywhere without taking the car or without all his belongings, his passport. You don't go very far in Europe without your passport. So it seemed to us that, you know, he's right here.
Determined to question that rental shop clerk themselves, Linda and Bob brought along their German-speaking friend, Felicity Lamb.
The moment we walked in, what struck me was you could, like, cut the atmosphere with a knife. We asked to see the log of the last few days, and he said, oh, I can't show you that. And so we said, well, why not? And he said, well, we started a new book, like the day before yesterday.
So they asked to see the old book.
He went away and came back and said, I'm sorry, we've thrown away the old book, the old rentals book.
This was hard to accept. First, their son disappeared. Now the MacPhersons could only conclude they're being lied to.
Somebody knew. You just could not just vanish from the face of the earth, be seen at 2:30 in the afternoon, the place closes at 4, and there is just vanished. Somebody knew.
The MacPhersons don't buy that your investigation was as thorough as you say it was.
It's their opinion, it's their thinking. They ask us about every step we did, and they were very suspicious, you know. Are you doing the right thing? Is everything...
They didn't trust you?
I had the opinion that they didn't trust the Austrian police to deal with such a case.
What Linda MacPherson trusted was her instinct. She knew her son was out there, somewhere on that glacier. Could you not walk away from it and accept this was a horrible, terrible accident and your son was not coming back to you and move on?
We always felt the answers were there, you know, and that somebody knew.
And what was the question?
What happened to Duncan was the question.
The search for their missing son has defined their lives and cost them their retirement savings. The MacPhersons have made 9 separate trips to the Austrian Alps over the years and spent some 300 days trekking through the mountains and valleys. For 14 years, they have been coming back to Stubai Glacier, searching and hoping. When we come back, facing the truth.
And to leave somebody out on a glacier overnight is, you know, and if he's down and injured, it's almost a death sentence.
Pictures of Duncan MacPherson freeze him in time, forever young. But worry and stress have aged his mother since he disappeared on that Austrian glacier so many years ago. Desperate to find out what happened, Linda MacPherson has built a detailed file, hoping someone will help her find the truth. Their first and last lead had been Duncan's abandoned car. It sat in the parking lot of Austria's Stubai Glacier ski resort for 42 days. 14 years had passed. Then, on July 18, 2003, under a sun so hot it was melting the glacier, a skier spots a frozen red mitt sticking out of the ice. And visible just under the surface, a corpse. It is chiseled out of the ice, packed into a body bag, and delivered to the undertaker in the nearby parking lot. It's Duncan MacPherson. His mother wanted to find him, but not like this. This had to be stunning. I mean, you were looking for answers for the past 14 years.
Yeah, you're right, for 14 years. And I'm almost at the point where I've began to believe I will never find his body during my lifetime.
It took police just 1 hour to solve this case. They said it was an accident. The death was no one's fault, except maybe the victims, for having strayed off the ski run.
An accident occurred. Duncan MacPherson fell into a crevasse, and he was recovered 14 years later. So things like that occur every year.
You work on the assumption that this was just an accident.
This is what life teaches us every day. This is what our experience teaches us every day.
This is how police depicted Duncan's death. He fell off the tow lift, then wandered off the approved ski run into an area riddled with open crevasses, and there he plunged to his death. The MacPhersons would have to absorb that later. First, they needed to get from Canada to Austria to be with their son.
I always promised myself, if and when he was found, I wanted some time with him by myself. I just wanted to say goodbye, and I just told him I loved him and missed him, and that he looked good, and was glad we'd found him.
In Austria, Duncan's body was returned to his parents. They couldn't afford to fly him home, so they arranged to cremate the remains. Everything in that metal recovery container was given over to the MacPhersons. Along with their son's body, the snowboard Duncan had rented 14 years earlier. The one the rental shop insisted had been returned. Remember, that was the reason police called off the search.
And always maintain their insistence that they were not missing any equipment.
Duncan was last seen at 2:30, and the equipment was due back around 4. That's an hour and a half. Had the rental shop sounded the alarm when he failed to show, might Duncan have been found alive? His dad thinks so.
It's 4 o'clock and the equipment is not back, and we're closing down for the night, and to leave somebody out on a glacier overnight is, you know, and if he's down and injured, it's almost a death sentence.
We contacted the rental shop. Behind the counter, the same man who was there almost 2 decades ago, and he is sticking to his story. The snowboard found with Duncan's body is not one of theirs, and police believe him.
We couldn't do more than ask the shopkeeper, is this yours or not? And he said, no, this is not mine. Please don't construct any hypothetical situation. You have to trust our experience we have in this case.
But there was someone else who knew a lot about that snowboard. The man who helped him pick it out, Walter Hinterhützel. He gave Duncan a snowboarding lesson the day he disappeared. You know, that board was found with Duncan's body. It was returned to his parents. I mean, it has been 17 years, but do you recognize?
Yeah,
you recognize this board?
That's a Duray board.
It is the board you recommended, the kind of board you told the clerk at the ski shop that you wanted Duncan MacPherson to have.
Yeah.
You know, what keeps Linda and Bob McPherson up nights is the whole issue of this snowboard. Somebody here knew that a rental board did not come back at the end of the day, and they kept quiet about it.
What should it help?
Well,
what should it lead to?
Well, from the minute somebody lies, if I was a police officer and somebody is lying, I would want to know, why are they lying?
Well, that's a question we have to raise every day. And why are the people lying to us?
But that's your job to find out.
Well, it's not easy, and not all the time possible to find out why people lie.
Bob and Linda McPherson are certain they have been dismissed and misled. Police and the ski operator have always insisted the ski run was safe and that Duncan must have wandered off the ski run and plunged into a crevasse. I suppose the impression that it gives is that he was a foolhardy adventurer and he ventured off the controlled path. And
entered a known crevassed area and broke through the snow bridge and into a crevasse.
Suggesting that maybe it was his fault.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
But when Duncan's body came out of the ice 3 years ago, he was right in the middle of that supposedly safe ski run in plain view of the restaurant. 10 days after Duncan's remains were removed from the ski run, Bob and Linda went to see the site themselves. Just when they thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, they did. Bob found something in the snow.
He picked up pieces of Duncan's bones and his shredded clothing, and
that was still left there?
Yeah. I just wanted to get away. I just thought, I can't deal with this. I can't believe that the police, first of all, would leave the death scene without cleaning it up, and I can't believe that these slope workers would drive us up here and with his Duncan's bones and his shredded clothing laying here.
It turns out the only police presence on top of that glacier that day was the helicopter pilot. Ski hill employees had cleaned up Duncan's remains.
Duncan's life was dismissed. Even when his body is found, he's treated no better than a piece of roadkill, you know, just tell the maintenance people to pick him up.
Is this the way a death scene is handled in other jurisdictions, that it's left in the hands of the operator where the body is found?
We have to deal with crime scenes, and we have to deal with missing people in the mountains and glaciers. And you have to distinguish those two things. You shouldn't mix it up, and you shouldn't construct the crime scene where there cannot be a crime scene because it was an accident, you know.
When we come back, how did the Iceman die?
There was no investigation done at all to sustain any sort of, or to support their argument that it was an accident.
It has been 17 years, and this journey is not over for the MacPhersons. They're back on Stubai Glacier, where their son Duncan's body was finally found. Police still say his death was an accident, but the MacPhersons don't buy that for a minute. Solving the mystery of what did kill Duncan that summer of '89 has become an obsession. They're looking at the raw news footage taken the day his body was recovered. They need to watch, but it's hard. You wanted so much to see it. Do you regret it?
We want to deal with reality and facts and truth. And even if it's difficult, we want to deal with it.
Duncan's death has been a terrible ordeal, but the MacPhersons say it has been made worse by the misdirection and evasion they have met at every turn.
Why did that happen? Nobody seems to want to know.
The MacPhersons won't let it go. With the help of their German-speaking friend, Felicity Lamb, they've petitioned the Austrian courts for all official files about their son. What they're about to discover will finally provide the key to unraveling their mystery.
What? The snowboard was cut like this?
Mm-hmm. They search every document, every photo for anything that looks out of place.
You know, something like this, the proper investigation would determine.
And then they see something. It's in one of the photographs of Duncan's damaged snowboard and boots, equipment they took home to Saskatoon and stored in their garage. Now they see what's been there all along. Red paint scratched onto the snowboard, still visible after all these years. How could it possibly have gotten there buried in the ice? And what about those curious V-shaped cuts punched into Duncan's ID cards? The same cut patterns appear on the ski boot and the bindings. Does it add up to anything? The forensic pathologist who first examined Duncan's body doesn't see anything suspicious.
I saw such damages on glacier corpses. Yes.
Walter Rabel says Duncan's injuries and the damage done to his equipment are the result of 14 years in grinding glacier ice. The glacier just breaks up the body?
Yes, yes. During the movement in the ice, the glacier breaks the body. But the injuries itself I could not examine exactly.
But
we saw the clothes body, did not declothe or unclothe him.
You didn't?
No, no.
How then were you able to make a thorough examination?
We never did an autopsy. We just have to do the identification.
Austrian law doesn't require accident victims to be autopsied, so there is a lot of information missing here. And since Austrian authorities refused to reopen the investigation, we took the MacPhersons' findings to an eminent Canadian scientist to see if she agrees with the official story, that the damage done to Duncan's body and equipment was the result of an accidental fall.
Who assumed that it was an accident? Based on what?
Police from all over North America approached Toronto forensic anthropologist Miriam Nafti for help when trying to figure out how someone died. Because Duncan MacPherson was cremated, Nafti has to rely on photos of his body and equipment and a CT scan taken in Austria. She also has a copy of the police report. Nafti came to some pretty shocking conclusions. How would you characterize this investigation?
I can tell you it's a textbook case of what not to do. There was no investigation done at all to sustain any sort of, or to support their argument that it was an accident.
Nafti focused on the breaks in Duncan's bones. His limbs appeared to be shorn off. The Austrian authorities said it was caused by the fall and 14 years in glacier ice. What would it take to break those bones?
For the femur, at least 1,800 to 2,500 pounds of torsion and pressure. That's the pulling and the twisting. And that's not going to occur in ice flow.
So this didn't make sense to you?
No. There's multiple trauma, and the joint surfaces, based on the radiographs and the photographs that I saw, would indicate that there was a violent fall, yes, but also perhaps some contact with machinery, just simply because of the bone ends, the shearing, the jagged ends. It's almost like a traumatic dismemberment.
How big a machine do you figure?
A big enough blade, any sort of a blade or a propeller, treads, and that sort of thing. Any kind of machinery that's going to have grinding, a pickup and a grind can do that sort of damage.
Nafti suspects after Duncan fell into the crevasse, this professional athlete survived in good enough shape to claw his way to the surface.
I think maybe he was incapacitated at that point, and perhaps something hit him that would have created that level of the crushing and the grinding of the bone surfaces of his other limbs.
Miriam Nafti's evidence and the mechanical cuts on Duncan's equipment appear to confirm the MacPhersons' worst suspicion, that their son was alive when he was hit by one of those red snow grooming machines and left to die alone on Stubai Glacier. Armed with this new evidence, Linda MacPherson is now appealing to the Austrian government, demanding to have the case reopened. You've accused the police of lying, of being in collusion with the ski operator.
We have reason to suspect that there's, I mean, why else? A young person dies on a ski slope, and you won't determine the cause and manner of death. Why?
It's been 17 years since Duncan disappeared. What keeps driving you?
Duncan would expect us to do this because he would be like, you cannot change what's happened to me, but you maybe, if you try, you might be able to change the way that ski operator is allowed to operate, and it may save someone else's life.
For years, the pathologist who first examined Duncan's body agreed with the official version of events. Not anymore. Walter Rabel didn't recommend an autopsy then, but now he concedes it could have been useful.
Yes. I would say for such cases, an autopsy should be made.
You admit some of their questions are valid.
I tried to answer them, and I said there were mistakes and problems. I feel guilty for other people involved in this case.
Why?
because they didn't do their job like they should do it, because there remain questions, and then they could have been cleared.
The Deputy Chief of Criminal Investigation is unmoved. Is this a problem that the investigation just assumed it was an accident? Is there some bias towards the operator? I mean, that could be the perception from outside.
The ski operator, what could be his interest?
There could be third-party liability, but you presume that it was Duncan's fault and nobody else.
Yeah.
What do you say to Duncan MacPherson's parents who just can't let this go?
For us, the case is closed. The body has been found. The missing person turned up, and his name was deleted from the system, of course, now. And for us, the case is solved.
On Stubai Glacier, they are busy filling in the crevasses, getting ready for the crowds who will flock to the mountain for the beginning of the new ski season. They are expecting well over 1 million visitors this year. And this is probably the last time Bob and Linda MacPherson will visit the place where their son died. They can't really afford another trip, not financially or emotionally.
You know, as we come up here over the years, and you'd look up over the glacier and watch people skiing, snowboarding, walking, and having such a very enjoyable time, and you just feel like going out on the Great Glacier and just scream at them and tell them to get the hell off there, because looked like people were just dancing on his grave.
As for their appeal to reopen Duncan's case, the Austrian government has turned the MacPhersons down.